And we are waiting for Vice President Kamala Harris to deliver her concession speech at any moment. We'll bring you there live. But in the meantime, we're also hearing from Connecticut's top officials today reacting to these election results. Some are saying they're extremely disappointed, but will continue fighting for Connecticut's values. Channel 3 Eyewitness News reporter Dylan Fearon is live at the state capitol in Hartford with the details. Dylan.
Well, Kara, Governor Lamont today is saying this is a wake-up call for Democrats. Comptroller Sean Scanlon saying Democrats need to look themselves in the mirror, ask themselves very tough questions. How did this happen? Why did this happen? So, of course, Connecticut Democrats upset with the presidential results, but very happy that Senator Chris Murphy, retained his seat in the U.S. Senate for a third term and that Connecticut Democrats swept all the congressional races.
We're going to fight like heck to protect our Connecticut values every day.
Standing together on the third floor of the Capitol, Connecticut's top Democrats admitting today they've been knocked down hard but will fight to pick themselves up. State leaders trying to make sense of it all, still in shock.
We'll have plenty of time to digest and analyze the reasons for the vote in favor of Donald Trump. But it's a disappointment, but not a failure.
When half our state woke up, they were in tears. They were scared, they were frustrated, they were angry, they were hurting. That was happening in my own household, in my own family.
Both Governor Lamont and Senator Blumenthal congratulating President-elect Trump today, despite disagreeing with America's decision, while maintaining Connecticut's core values aren't going anywhere, fighting for reproductive rights, LGBTQ+ rights, and leading on gun safety. Proud that, despite some voting problems, it was a smooth election here.
I'm really proud of Connecticut. You know, standing up was an incredibly contentious 120 days of national campaigning in particular, and people are talking about civil wars and a lot of worries out there. We had a very peaceful election.
Ben Proto is chairman of the Connecticut GOP, thrilled Trump is now president-elect and that he was able to cut the 2020 margin by nearly half in Connecticut, from 20 points to 12.
But more importantly, I think it's an indication that the people of Connecticut are engaged in his message, believe in his message. I mean, clearly, Kamala Harris never connected with voters, and her policies, or what she called her policies, really weren't policies that voters were interested in, and didn't believe that would, impact their lives in a positive way.
It's very disorienting for all of us, very disappointing.
And both Governor Lamont and Senator Blumenthal today promising to work with former President, now President-elect Trump, much like they did during his first term from 2017 to 2020. We're live in Hartford today. I'm Dylan Fearon, Channel 3 Eyewitness News.
All right. Thank you, Dylan. We'll continue.